Hey kids, Mr. Fly here, hope you're well. Now, I've been a very lucky chap for the last few weeks because I've been riding this, the brand new for 2019 Triumph Scrambler 1200 XC. If you want to find out what I've learnt all about the bike, stick around and stay tuned. So for the last couple of weeks I've been riding the absolute pants off this bike to try to really get to understand what the bike's all about. I've ridden it in all sorts of conditions, on all sorts of roads, motorways, back lanes, in the wet, in the dry, short rides, long range rides, you name it, I've done it on this bike in order to really understand what the bike is about. And during the time that I've had it, I've learnt some valuable lessons. Not just the good things, but the bad things too. So in this video, I'm going to bring you those lessons learnt. I'm going to show you what the bikes are like to ride in different conditions, and then I'm going to talk to you a bit about cost of ownership as well. As usual, I've done some research, found out how much one of these bikes is going to cost you if you want to keep one. Okay, so this is my in-depth review of the Scrambler 1200 XC. If you're in the market for one of these bikes, you're going to want to stick around and stay tuned. So how about town and the urban environment then for the big old Scrambler 1200? Well, pretty good actually. You feel like you're sitting pretty high up even on the XE, which is the slightly lower of the two variants of the bike. The XE is 30mm higher than this, but even on this one it feels like I've got a great view over the traffic ahead, so you can sort of plot your way through. Doesn't feel heavy or ponderous, so filtering completely possible on the bike. Not that this is particularly a filtering opportunity, but if you're going to be going into busy cities, then certainly you could filter on the bike. It's not too wide or has any terrible things poking out the sides of it. And the engine note and the exhaust has got a great sound to it, so people can hear you coming, particularly through built-up areas like this. Sorry, just had to do that. So yeah, no problems at all in the urban environment, I would suspect. Okay, this is just a little market town, but you get the general idea. Doesn't feel heavy when you're going slowly, there's no snatchiness in the throttle. Good view over the traffic, and it's got a pretty good road presence so people can see and hear you coming. So yeah, thumbs up through town. Okay, so what's the Scrambler 1200 like to ride at night? Well, it's obviously not night at the moment, but what I want to do is just come up to here and park in the car park up here and show you what the lights are like. Hello sir. Show you what the lights are like before I actually show you what it's like at night to ride. So we'll just pull over up here and show you the setup. The Scrambler has all LED lighting, as so many modern bikes do these days. Where can I shove her? Oh, let's just stick it here for now. Let's just pop it there. I'll leave the engine running so I can show you what the lights are like in their sort of running mode, if you like. Now this particular bike has the auxiliary lights as well. So here we are, this is the sort of daytime running setup, if you like, top half of the light on. Let me put them onto full beam, so the switch is here. Put them onto full, and you'll see we now get the top half, which is a bit brighter, but you'll notice that the auxiliary lights have gone off, which is odd. I don't know why they do that, but I noticed that earlier, but there we go, they go off when you go to full beam. Let's bring those back to sort of daytime mode. And interestingly, there we go, put that, so the auxiliary lights you turn on using this switch here, and then you've got a light here, a switch here rather, as usual, to bring it to flash the lights on full. There we go, we'll flash it like that. Alright, anyway, not sure I did a brilliant demonstration there, but let's get on the bike at night time and see what the light actually to ride in the darkness. Okay, so with the magic of YouTube, darkness has fallen, or at least as much as it does this time of year. It's summer when I'm recording this, so it doesn't get properly dark, but it is good enough to let us see how the lights etc work on the Triumph Scrambler. So how's she fare in darkness? Well, first thing that I noticed on the bike, which is rather pleasing, and I've seen on one or two other Triumphs as well of late, the more modern ones, is that the switchgear is lit on the Triumph, and only KTMs and, as I say, some of the other Triumphs do that I've noticed, so that's great news. I don't know why some of the other manufacturers don't do that. I'm sure it's only a matter of time before they catch on and do that. The other thing that I've done is I've switched the TFT into its sort of contrast detection mode, so it automatically goes to nighttime mode. It's gone with this rather pleasing black background, which is nice and clear when it's dark outside. And I've also got the auxiliary light switched on. There's a little button just on the left hand handlebar that switches those on. It just spreads out a bit of extra light sort of widthways at night, so it makes you a bit more conspicuous as well as shows you where you're going. But something I got wrong when I showed you during the day the lights was the way that the full beam works. In fact, the switch on the handlebars on the left, that just goes between daylight running, which is that, and dipped lights. And in fact, to put a full beam on, you use the trigger at the front. So if you pull it once, it goes on to full beam. You see we've got the blue light now, and now I'm on full beam. You probably can't see that on the GoPro, but it throws the light out much further. And then when I hit the trigger again, it puts it down to dip. So it's a much easier way of doing things. And also, the good news is, it doesn't switch off those lights either. The auxiliary lights that I was talking about. Or rather, they're not impacted when you've got your headlights on. You can have the auxiliary lights on, as I've got on at the moment. So I hope that all makes sense. The lights are, of course, LED, so they're kind of, well, I want to say the word class leading, but they are the modern way of doing lights, aren't they? And they are chucking out loads of light. I've had cars in the past that have had far worse headlights than this. So yeah, from a lighting point of view, riding at night, the Triumph Scrambler 1200, top marks. So how about riding in rain and inclement weather on the big Scrambler 1200 XC? Well, like any motorcycle, pretty unpleasant to ride in unpleasant weather on it, but occasionally you have to, don't you? It's been raining all afternoon, and I've been on the bike for a little while. But as bikes go, it's absolutely fine actually. It's got the heated grips on, my hands are nice and warm. I am in the full sort of wind blast, because of course it's a naked bike, so there's no protection from the rain from the front. But there you go, you expect that. This little windscreen gives you a degree of protection from the wind, but of course you get the rain. It's got the tyres on here, Metzeler Torrance tyres fitted as OEM, and I have to say they give you a great deal of confidence. They look sort of off-roady, but they're not. They're road tyres really, but they look the part. But they're very confidence inspiring, both in the dry and wet. These bikes are quite big, and you really can lay them over on their sides on the corners, so no problem with confidence on the grip levels on the tyres. And of course you've got ABS as well on the machine, which gives you confidence to brake. So if you must motorcycle in the rain, then the Scrambler 1200 is absolutely fine. Just make sure you've got the right gear on.
So in these more in-depth reviews, I often like to cover some of the practical aspects of owning a motorcycle, and there are a few things that people have asked me that often come up. So one thing is, what's the bike like to get on the centre stand? So number one, I'm pleased to say the Scrambler XC does come with a centre stand. It is quite a heavy old bike, and this has got a full tank of fuel, but I'll have a go at it. The good news is, got plenty of places to grab hold of when you go for the centre stand. Let's get her upright and see what she's like. All right, stand down and give her a haul. There we go, actually not too bad. I'm only a wimpy fella, and that was quite straightforward to get onto the centre stand, so that's pretty good. The other thing that people often ask me about is the horn. How loud is that? So again, it's difficult to show you through this mic, but let's give it a blast. I'll just bring the bike to life. It's obviously it's keyless ignition on this. So there we go, she's just firing up, and let's give the horn a blast. Oh, very shrill, single tone, but there's no way you're going to miss that. And then while we're on the practical aspects, of course, the bike is chain driven, and because it's got a centre stand, it means it's going to be very easy to get at the chain in order to lubricate it. So that's good news. Then the other thing that people often ask me about are the tyre valves. So let's find them on here. So here we go. The valves on here are the straight through type. They're not angled, but because of the gaps between the spokes here and the way they positioned it, it's quite easy to get at, but you might want to put some of those angled valves on there. And just while we're on practical matters, the other thing that people ask me about is what's the seating position like. You've seen me ride the bike in the previous reviews, but let me just show you what it's like actually sat on the bike. If I get it back on the side stand again, there we go, and then sat on the bike. What I like about the XC is it does have this nice low seat. So my feet, look, I'm 5'8" with a 32-inch leg, and my feet are almost flat on the floor. Look, it's very comfortable. It's the same as that either side, so sitting position is absolutely fine on the Triumph XC.
So how about faster roads, dual carriageways, motorways, that sort of thing? Well, the big Scrambler really has no lack of power whatsoever. So keeping up at high speed is not an issue on this bike. I'm cruising along here on this dual carriageway and indicating 80 miles an hour, just keeping up with traffic. But there is loads more to give, and this bike can easily get you into stupid speeds if you want it to. In terms of wind protection, well, it is of course a naked bike, so there's very little in the way of wind protection. This one does have this little sort of bikini fairing come tiny screen thing, and I think actually that's doing a good job of keeping the airflow smooth over my head. because although I've got plenty of air hitting me around the chest and shoulders, it is clean air. I haven't got that terrible sort of vibration and fatiguing blast on me that you sometimes get on bikes. So it works quite well in that respect. In fact, feeling where the airflow goes, that seems to be doing a really good job throwing most of the air above my head. So cruising along on faster roads, I think you could do it, you know, for some time without getting fatigued. So another thumbs up for the big Triumph Scrambler 1200 on faster roads. Okay, so how about cleaning the Scrambler then? What are the areas of the bike that get particularly cruddy, and how does she clean up? Well, I've been riding this in all sorts of cruddy weather of late, and it's got quite a bit of grease and grime on it over the last couple of weeks since I've been riding it. In particular, around the exhaust area here, look, quite a lot of rubbish has caught up on there that's going to need some attention, as has the rear swing arm, as you might expect, and then under the front where the radiator is as well is pretty cruddy, as is the tank. So quite a lot of work to do, as you'd expect. Awful lot of nooks and crannies on this. I don't think it's going to be a particularly easy bike to clean, but I'll crack on and we'll see how she comes out. These spoked wheels are a particular pain to clean because the spokes are on the outside of the rim, so that it's can be a tubeless tyre, but it means you can't get your hands in between them very easily to clean them. So that's a bit of a faff. Right, there we go, one clean Scrambler again, all done. I would definitely put that in the more difficult category to clean. An awful lot of nooks and crannies, definitely need a bike dryer. The worst thing actually turned out to be those spoked wheels, which are a right pain to get at. But anyway, she's looking lovely again now. Let's get her back indoors. Okay, how about fuelling up on the Triumph? Well, we're just out on a bit of a run today, done a fair old journey, and I've got 40-mile range to go, and the fuel light has come on. So my next mission is to find myself a fuel station, fuel up, see if there's any surprises. Not expecting any, but you never know with bikes, do you? Sometimes the fuel caps can be a bit fiddly, or there's something funny. Let's go and find out. So according to the bike's fuel computer, before I got the fuel light on, I was averaging around about 51 miles per gallon since I've had the bike, which seems quite reasonable. It's comparable with my my BMW GS, which is a 1200cc twin-cylinder machine, does a similar sort of miles per gallon. And I've had this on its most thirsty riding mode the whole time I've had it, and I've not been sparing the bike particularly. I happen to know after this massive traffic jam there is a fuel station up here. Right, fuel station just here. Let's go get some motion lotion. Right, so as I mentioned before, this is a keyless ignition bike, so this is where that whole thing fails sometimes, isn't it? Getting fuel. Let's see how this works. So if I turn this off, right, I definitely need the key. Well, it looks at, oh no I don't, look at that. If you do it quickly, you can just unscrew it without the key. That's alright. That's interesting. Now this particular fuel cap thing, I quite like the Monza look, but what I don't like about it is the fact that it's the plastic one underneath it. So there you go. I mean, that's a bit cheap and nasty compared to the cover, isn't it? But there we go. You either like it or you don't, I suppose. Right. Let's get some go juice. That should do. Took 12 litres, and that was just to the fuel gauge light coming on. Right, let's go get it paid for. Okay, so that's that all bought and paid for. Let's just bring her alive again. What I like to do now is just see how long it takes to register that we've actually got a fuel tank a full tank of fuel. Okay, so it's registering not a lot at the moment still. Start her up. It's one of my complaints about Triumphs actually, that they take a little while to register the fuel. It's just a very small point, but other bike manufacturers manage to get that right these days. Anyway, let's see how long it takes till it recognises that I've filled up. Still showing a quarter of a tank. Come on, Mr. Horsebox, where are you going? Right, there it goes, it's climbing now, look, so it didn't take too long. A few hundred yards, and there we go, full tank. And it's saying I've got a range now of 168 miles. Well, I've ridden the bike on that last tank full at least 168 miles, so I imagine that would calculate up a bit over the next few miles. It's good range out of this tank. Anyway, okay, so no surprises at the fuel station particularly then. Not a big fan of this fuel cap with the plastic bit underneath it, but you can take it off without having to use the key, which is quite handy.
So at the start of the video I said that I'd done some research into how much one of these bikes would cost you to own. So I've written down the figures as usual so I don't get them wrong. But the cost of ownership then of the bike, how much is this going to cost you to keep in the garage roadworthy? And this is excluding things like depreciation and perishable parts like tyres and brake discs and pads. So road tax, first thing, it's over 600cc. So here in the UK you're going to pay £91 per annum if you pay in one hit. So £91 for road tax. Insurance, got a quote from my friends at Principal Insurance, and they gave me a quote of £133 fully comprehensive with a £350 excess. So that's, I think that's a pretty much, it's a bargain price. £133 for the insurance. That, of course, is indicative only. It's for somebody that lives in my house, of my age, with my no claims bonus, etc. And then servicing, I went to my friends up at Pure Triumph in Woburn to get a servicing quote. So costs may vary, but these are the quotes that they gave me. The first service, the running in service on this is at 500 miles, and that would be about £60. Then the service intervals on this are every 10,000 miles, and the annual service at Pure Triumph would cost you £245. And then just so you know, there's a big service at 20,000 miles, that's about £400, and there's another big service at 40,000 miles, that's £545. But anyway, your normal annual service, £245. So assuming you do 5,000 miles in the first year, that's what I always do these figures on for comparative purposes. The first year servicing will be the £60 running in plus half of the £245 per 10,000 miles, if that makes sense, hope you're with me. So that comes out at £182.50 per annum for servicing. So add that lot together and you come up with £406.50 per annum, or £33.87 a month to keep this bike in your garage ready to roll. Now I've done a lot of these calculations over the years on bikes, and I have to say £33.87 a month is a very good price indeed. So for a premium bike of this type, that is an excellent cost of ownership.
Well, of course, you can tour on any motorcycle, can't you? But what's the Scrambler 1200 like as a touring proposition? Well, pretty good actually, for a number of reasons. Firstly, it's got that big old engine and loads of punch, so when you want to get somewhere to actually start your tour, you're going to have no issues whatsoever. You've got to do some motorway miles, and you can bang off the miles no problems. It's a comfortable ride, lovely riding position, not too fatiguing in terms of wind blast, and you've got a load of power in the engine to get you down the motorway. And then once you get to where you're going, it's absolutely glorious. On twisty roads you can have a lot of fun. So in that sort of sense, as a dual purpose bike to get you somewhere and then to enjoy the location which you've got there, the bike would be great. And then the other thing is it's quite useful for carrying stuff as well. It has got a fixing for a pannier on this particular version of the bike I've got the soft bag attached. It's quite spacious actually, you get a fair bit of kit in there. Plus there's a rack on the back that you could strap a soft bag to, so carrying luggage wouldn't be too bad either. And it's just a nice place to be and spend time. So yeah, I think touring on the Triumph Scrambler 1200 XC would be an absolute pleasure. So, time for what I call my lugging about test, designed to simulate what it's like to have the bike on your driveway and you're moving it around, and also to check out what the turning circle's like. So I've come to my usual spot for this little test, which is my local train station here in Great Missenden. And if I can find an empty spot, it's a pretty busy car park. Here we go. Right, so these car parks are standard British, or these spaces are standard British parking spaces, i.e. not very big. So I'm going to stick the bike smack bang in the middle of one. Just find neutral, there we go. Easy to get the stand down, killer. Right, okay, here she is then, parked in the middle of that. I'm going to see what she's like to lift her off the side stand and bring her around, see if she'll go around in what tighter turn. So here we go. So plenty to grab hold of, which is good. Nice and low bike as well, so even though it is 200 odd kilograms, it doesn't feel heavy to lift off the stand, so that's fine. Right, let's go around a full lock then and see what we've got without scraping the stand too much. Round we come. And we're going to get into the next space. So basically it's done that in 2 spaces. Let me show you what we've got. So I started off in the middle of that one and I've come round 180 degrees and I'm on the outer edge of that one. So I put that in the quite tight category. I've been on bikes that have got tighter turning circles, but I've been on them with much wider too, so that's quite a reasonable turning circle on there in terms of it's quite tight. So yeah, not bad at all.
So having ridden the bike for the last few weeks and really spanked the pants off it as far as riding it in different conditions, I've learned lots of lessons about it, and I thought I'd take you through those things that I've learned, the sorts of things that you wouldn't necessarily pick up if you just took the bike out for a 1-hour test ride. Again, I've written them down so that I don't miss anything out. Let's start with the negatives, and I have to say, I always like to try and find some negatives about bikes that I review, just for, you know, in the interest of balance, but I really am nitpicking here. There's really not that much wrong with this bike, but some of the things that I've spotted, number one, and this really is a nitpick, the mirrors. Number one, I'm not too keen on the sort of Mickey Mouse styling, although as Mickey Mouse mirrors go, what they've done with the back of these with the brushed aluminium looks quite nice. But at high speeds, at motorway speeds, there is a very slight blurring on the mirrors. It is only slightly, but I haven't noticed that on other bikes, so that's number one. The next thing, and this one really did annoy me the whole time that I rode it, and I mentioned it before, is the little joystick on the left-hand controls. It just interferes with where the indicators are. So every time, without fail, it still hasn't got into my muscle memory. When I've had to go and put the indicators on, I've had to have a look at the left handlebar just to check I'm getting the indicator switch. Now that's all right if you're just going along a road and turning left, say at a junction, you can look at it and that's fine. But if you're on a motorway and you're doing a shoulder check, it's a right pain to look at your, you know, what your fingers are doing as well. I'm sure over time, well I hope over time, it would get into muscle memory, but that joystick indicator confusion is a right nightmare on Triumph. So sorry Triumph, that is a bad one, that needs to get sorted out. Next off, there is some heat that comes off the engine. Now this isn't necessarily a bad point here in Blighty. I'm recording this in the summer, but it hasn't been a particularly warm summer, and actually I found the heat off the engine quite pleasant, but I imagine if you're in a hot country that could become a problem. Not too much of a problem with this exhaust. Often with scramblers, you know, your legs touching the exhaust and you can get burnt, but Triumph have done a very clever thing here by sculpting the exhaust in with the engine to avoid that. You've got this sort of, it goes in here so you can get your legs through, and you don't really burn your legs, but there is a bit of heat off the engine. That may be a plus or a minus depending on where you live. Next thing I've noted here as a negative, does feel a little bit heavy when you're lugging it around. I did that lugging around test, and you know, it's when you're moving it around on the driveway, it does take a bit of heft to move it about. So if you are a particularly wimpy person, you might struggle a bit with this. It does feel a heavy bike when you're, you know, getting it off the stand and so on. And then, last but not least, depending on how OCD you are about cleaning, I've found, as you may have seen in my cleaning clip, the wheels, just a real nuisance to clean. Very clever the way they've done the spokes on these to make the tyres tubeless, but what it means is it's hard to get your hand in to clean the wheels. Not the only bikes that suffer from that, but there we go. So as I say, nitpicking, they were the negative points that I found on the bike in the period that I've had it. Let's move on to the positives. Okay, so on to the positive points then, and there's an awful lot to like about this bike. It really is a lovely machine. So the things that I've noticed in particular, first thing, and these are in no particular order actually, is this, the standard pipe on here. Number one, it's a work of art. I think it looks great. I know some people think it's a bit busy, but I think it looks good. But what I was going to mention is that it just pops and bangs wonderfully. There's no need to replace this with a fancy aftermarket one. When you roll off the throttle, it just makes some delightful pops and bangs. I really like that. So that's the first thing I noticed. The next thing, the engine on this. Now, the bike goes like stink if you want it to. Of course, it's a 1200cc machine. But the beauty of this is the torque. The thing is just laden with torque. So you can have it in a low gear. You can have it in fourth or fifth gear, running along at 35, 40 miles an hour, wind the throttle on, and it still goes. So it's a very lazy ride if you want it to be. For me, the torque on this engine has been just an absolute joy to ride with. Next thing that I loved about the bike is the amazing attention to detail. Triumph are brilliant at this again. I've already mentioned the exhaust being lovely, but just little things like the, you know, the detailing on the triple clamp, the engine covers, the brushed aluminium everywhere, the mud guards, etc., the little covers on the spotlights, the indicators, everything about the bike oozes quality these days. Triumph really have nailed that. So that's the next thing I love about it. Next up, and this is a bit of an odd one actually, is the TFT on here. Hugely improved for Triumphs. Now I have to say, on a classic style bike like this, I would rather have actual dials. But if you're going to go TFT, this TFT now on the Triumph is just massively improved over the old Triumph TFT, the one that they fit on things like the Street Triples, which I've always described as being a bit Fisher-Price. This one, however, much, much nicer. It has everything that you need. It does some clever things that I haven't had a chance to play with, mainly because I haven't had a manual. But you know, it looks good. It has a fuel gauge. It's as TFTs go. That's a nice one. So that's another good thing. The other positive thing about this bike, the XC compared to the XE in particular, is that it's very, very much easier to ride. You saw the ride height on it. Number one, you can absolutely get your feet down easier on this, and this makes it, just to me, a less ponderous bike. When you come to a T-junction, you don't feel like you're going to drop it. It's very much more accessible than the XE. So the XC scores in that regard. The other thing was the side bag that I've been using on here. It may look a bit weird, but actually I found the thing very, very useful indeed. It's quite big, and you can, you know, it's just handy for me carrying camera kit and stuff, or my waterproofs, or you know, a jumper or whatever. Just very useful indeed. And then last but not least, and this is probably the most important thing, I think this bike just makes you feel good. It's just a cool bike to ride, and it gives you, you know, a big grin on the face. And I don't think there's any better accolade you can give a bike than that. So there we go, that's my in-depth review of the Triumph Scrambler 1200 XC. In summary, a lovely, lovely bike, very little to not like about it. And I have to say, compared to the XE, which I've also ridden, I prefer this bike. Just as a shorter fellow, this bike is much more manageable, and it's 1,800 quid cheaper than the XC. The extra suspension travel and so on that you get on the XE, I don't need that. I would never take one of these off-road. That's why you haven't seen me ride this off-road. It is a bit heavy for practically off-roading. I'm sure if you're an off-road expert, you could do that, but it's not for me. This, for me, is sort of a cruiser bike, and the XC just works better than the XE. Okay, I hope you found that of some interest if you're in the market for one of these bikes. I don't just do bike reviews here on the Missenden Flyer, but I also do trips and tours at home and abroad. I do product reviews. I do bike news every month. I do the odd live stream. Basically anything and everything to do with motorcycles, I try and cover it here on the Missenden Flyer. If you've enjoyed this video, it would be great to have you click the subscribe down below, and that way you can join me on the next video. Okay, that's it for now. Hope that's been of some interest. I look forward to speaking to you again soon. Till then, this has been the Missenden Flyer. Cheerio.